What do you do when your induction comms aren't landing, students are overwhelmed, and your inbox is getting 400 emails a day? In this episode, Emma Kelly, Communications and Marketing Officer for Residential and Sports Services at the University of Manchester, explains how her team flipped the traditional model and created a space on Discord where students could talk, ask questions, and support each other with incredible results. I'm Gareth Hughes, and this is the University Comms podcast. So, hi Emma, thanks for coming along today. Just to get cracking, do you want to introduce yourself, give us a little bit of background about you and your role?
Yes, so I'm Emma. I work in communications and marketing in accommodation at the University of Manchester. I basically am communications and marketing, so I look after the whole life cycle of students from when they are thinking about the university, starting to have a little look at our accommodation offering, through to our open days, inductions, and then while they're living with us in-house, and then when they're starting to move out into the community, helping them move out. So it's a kind of really broad role covering all those different areas. We've got about just over 8,000 students across 20 plus different halls. So it's very broad, big audience, lots of different things to communicate, from how to do your application through to get your measles vaccines. So yeah, really broad, really interesting role. And yeah, I've been in this role for a couple of years, previously worked in research communications, and then prior to that, student communications and internal communications. So I've got quite a broad understanding of kind of the different bits of universities through that as well.
So, in this role and thinking about the work that you've done recently with the Discord server, where did that come from?
So we have our inductions that work really well, but we do sort of like an annual survey, and one of the things that came from it is about expectation management. So when students arrive and move into halls and they know what to expect and they know what's coming, they tend to have a really good time in halls. But it's helping kind of join up that approach, and that sort of planted a bit of a seed for me. We used Facebook groups as part of our induction material. So one of the things students really want when they come is to meet who their future flatmates are going to be before they move in. And so we had different Facebook groups for each hall, but the way it worked to avoid kind of promoters or just like non-students joining was the team would individually approve members. So it was very labour intensive, but we also found that students would join, be like, oh, who lives in this block, meet each other, and then basically just leave. So there was a real kind of engagement drop. And I thought, we're really missing an opportunity here to do a bit more wraparound communications, talk to those students about what's going on. And it's something that we weren't sort of exploiting properly, but it felt like Facebook also wasn't the platform to be doing that. Students would make an account literally for this, meet someone, and go off to somewhere else. So it's like, right, Facebook isn't really where we should be doing this, but it's sort of, what is the other platform? How could it work? And how can we create that place to meet other students, which is what we know they really want, but also kind of allow us to communicate with them and help with that transition from home to halls. Kind of also joined up with our accommodation office, so they get about 400 emails a day during the sort of allocation through to arrivals, and their working weekends. And I thought there must also be a way to skim off some of the questions that aren't as complex, and then they have the capacity to do the really complex, really important stuff that they do. So it was kind of like a few different threads, and thinking about, how can we join them together? Is there a way to bring all this in to one place and kind of deal with some of those issues and kind of make the most of the platforms that we're using?
Yeah. So community building and also like query management as well at the same time.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah. So what made you settle on Discord as a platform?
So I brought in, as part of my role, the use of a chatbot. So using AI-powered chatbot on our accommodation pages, which worked really well and did help reduce queries to the inbox. So I thought, this is working. Students would like a different way to ask questions. And I sort of also was thinking as well, slightly kind of complicated area, but we do room swaps before students move in and while they're in halls. And thinking about, is there a way they can do that between themselves before they arrive, so we don't do as much of the kind of trying to match them. And if they do it before they arrive, then we don't have to like check them out of one room and check them into another room. So it was thinking about that and alternative platforms, like what ticks all these boxes. I did some takeovers for the brilliant conversion teams we've got at Manchester on their Discords. And when I was on them, I was like, oh, there's something here with this. It worked really well for what they were doing and doing the takeovers. And I thought, I kind of had one of those moments where I was like, I can take this and I can adapt it and I can use it for this. And it kind of ticked a lot of those boxes. And when I kind of went away, I was like, all right, I'm going to look into Discord. The age group we were wanting to hit, it's really well used amongst them.
Mm.
I've got to say, one of the advantages is, it's free, it's easy to implement. That's always kind of a good thing. It had been used in the university, which I guess people that maybe work in universities, having kind of someone that's done the IGO side or got the approvals, kind of like, great, that makes life a bit easier. We have WhatsApp communities and we kind of went through that process and I was like, okay, we don't have to do it with this. This is great. And I found the flexibility of the channel and the server is really interesting. So we could have lots of different channels. So, because say we've got like 20 halls, to have somewhere where we could have all those halls in one place was really useful, rather than kind of having to go between them, which is what we're doing with the Facebook. And from like a management perspective, they were kind of all in one place. So there was a place where you could have that specific kind of community building. We're living in Unsworth, but then the sort of broader space for questioning, space for room swaps, space for kind of meeting people outside your hall. So it kind of ticked all those boxes. And kind of when I worked out in my head, I was like, this makes total sense. This is the perfect platform for it, and kind of is a platform they're using. So we're not asking them to do something new.
I guess actually then, just to take a step back from that, I'm assuming everyone listening to this is familiar with what Discord is, but potentially they might not be. So yeah, it'd be useful just to give a bit of an overview about what Discord actually is. I mean, I feel like I know what it is. I've used one Discord channel like in my lifetime, which is for a music festival that I go to. But I still, if you ask me to explain it, I maybe probably couldn't explain. So I'll let you do that.
I'm not sure I'm much better. I was equal in that before the Discord takeovers, I'd used it once for like a market I'd done when I do like my pottery out of work.
That's cool.
So I was a little unfamiliar. I would say it's a bit like a forum, or it's a bit like Slack if you've used Slack outside, like in work. So you have channels that everyone's on. So it's like big overarching thing is a server, and then you have lots of different channels, which is like different sort of messaging areas. And you can have ones that everyone can go into, or you can have ones that have like specific people in them. And you can have different kind of rules on different ones, different topics. So it sort of works like that. And so the students can jump between smaller ones that are like just their hall, or bigger ones that are like just their campus, so like everyone in Fallowfield, or the whole of the server. So something like everyone that wants to do sport. So it's sort of like that. I think that's the best explanation I've come up with when I've tried to tell everyone sort of internally that it
That's
is.
good.
Yeah, it's a bit like a forum, a bit like Slack.
Makes sense to me. And am I right in thinking that it's like associated with the gaming community? Like there's a lot of gamers on it. And do you know why is that? Was that it just happens to be what they use to
I have
chat
no
to?
idea. I'm not a gamer, but
Fair.
I do.
No,
Yeah, it's
same.
definitely a gaming one, because one of the things I did was I actually talked to a lot of colleagues that have got kids about this age, and was like,
Yeah.
do your children use Discord, and what do they think of it? And yeah, a lot seem to do it around gaming. There are kind of big other communities, but yeah, there does seem to be kind of a steer towards gamers.
It's interesting. It'd be good to know, just to look at the demographics that are kind of using, not just for this at the university, but more broadly, because gamers as a group traditionally you might perceive as being difficult to reach potentially. So this could be a way in. So yeah, no, it's really interesting to know that. Thanks for that. And then so you've talked about sort of where the idea came from, and that you had all these different like, groups for different areas. I guess once that you'd had the idea to move forward with it, how did it work in practice when you were implementing the group? Like, what did you have to do? What kind of engagement and impact did you get?
So luckily we have inductions that we send out to all 8,000 students. So this covers things like how you get your post. We've got some brilliant stuff that my colleague does around consent and harassment. Big one is there's like a fire safety bit, but the students have to complete this. So all 8,000 get it. You have to do it. It's tied to the booking form. So when you want to arrive, you can book once you've completed it, and we get about 95% completion rate. So it was pretty easy in terms of like, let's put it in this.
Yeah.
And it meant that we were able to kind of control that access as well. So one of the concerns we had was, how do we make sure that only students join and we don't sort of repeat the big difficulty with the Facebook groups, which was that we needed to kind of manage who joined. So that was a kind of well, not really a workaround, a kind of solution to that problem.
Mm.
So we embedded it in that. And then sort of day-to-day management was, I brought together a team from across accommodation. So we've got like a customer support team who know loads and loads of information. So like Dave and Heidi like know so much stuff. So I brought all that team together to kind of manage it through a mix of kind of classic have a Teams chat and whoever's monitoring sticks something in if they don't know, through to us all just on the Discord answering questions, monitoring it. In terms of kind of the amount of time we ran it for, we do our allocations after A-level results. So students find out where they're living then, rather than kind of first come, first served. So that was quite nicely timed in that it gave us a 3-week window to arrivals to run it and run it quite intensively,
Yeah.
and then transition students into living in halls. So it was a very clear decision that once students are in halls, we wanted to transition them into going and talking to Res Life, going and seeing the CSA team, going to the receptions if they've got problems, rather than using the Discord. Partly because there's certain processes that need to happen. Partly, I think that face-to-face is really important, and it helps us pick up on any issues. And then the other reason for the kind of 3-week window was capacity management. Once students start to arrive, everyone's out, everyone's working weekends, and it just like wasn't practical to keep running it once students had arrived. So it gave us that really nice 3-week window to really kind of focus in on it, to help with that transition, and then kind of be like, and now you're here, Theo, have a wonderful time.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the way we implemented it. In terms of sort of the practicalities of like, what was the server like? We kind of had lots of different channels, as we touched on it. So we had like Squad Finder for people who wanted to find other sports people, like Ask Accommodation, so where people could come and ask us questions, general chat, uni chat, specific channels for postgrads and international students, and then the room swap channel, and then one for each hall. So it was pretty big, and students were put into their hall channel based on a questionnaire when they joined. I was quite strict with the moderation. There's a sort of Discord working group at Manchester, and we kind of discuss it quite a bit, like, do you let them have photos and images or do you not?
Right.
So we were quite, because I didn't know how busy it would be, quite a strict approach with that, and was like, well, I don't want to monitor that as well.
Yeah.
So in terms of kind of the practicalities of the setup, that was sort of the approach, if that makes sense.
That 3-week window then, you guys must have been waiting to see what is this gonna work? Are we gonna get anyone joining? What was engagement like?
Yeah, I did spend the first the weeks before going, I don't know if it's going to work. Don't know how many people are going to join this. It was like hugely successful and more than kind of we had potentially anticipated. I think, I maybe hadn't. I thought this. I felt like it was something that would be used, but I don't think I fully appreciated how much. So we had about 3,000 students join it. Quite a lot were already on Discord. Clearly showed ones on Discord were like, yeah, great, join this other one. About 35,000 messages sent. And then on that Ask Accommodation channel, we had about 700 questions we answered. So it was like way, way busier than kind of maybe we'd potentially expected. But that was fantastic because it just showed that it was needed and wanted and somewhere where students felt like, yeah, this is great.
And was there because those numbers are just like literally insane. The fact that you're saying there's 8,000 students that come into the halls and 3,000 of those join the Discord. That's such a high level of engagement. 35,000 messages, like that's crazy. And it's such a good way, I guess, of, like we said earlier, building community, helping people get to know each other. We also talked about the inquiry management side. You were saying that the accommodation teams were getting like 400 emails a day, and that this you thought could be helpful because people would always be able to answer each other's questions, and then they would then see what the answers were. Did that have an impact on the volume of emails that were being received by the team?
Yeah, there seemed to be certainly a reduction, and certainly a reduction in those kind of simpler questions. So like one of the things you were saying about the community building, one of the lovely things we saw was, so we have some returners that come back, and seeing them answer very specific questions from people moving into their halls That was so wonderful. And
Mm.
yeah, it was definitely picked off those kind of simpler questions. And one of the things I think maybe we hadn't anticipated was a lot of students had questions and maybe didn't feel it was worth emailing, or they didn't kind of want to call about them. So we ended up answering, I think, a lot of those questions as well. And one of the feedbacks we did a survey afterwards, a lot of students said like, "Oh, people were asking questions I hadn't even thought to ask, but actually it was
Mm.
so helpful to know." So there was maybe like about a 10% drop, but then there was all this other stuff
Yeah,
that
yeah.
had never been asked, and maybe they were sat at home worrying about, that we could deal with and we could answer really easily, and like
Mm.
told us lots of stuff that maybe. One of the things I did was, while I was kind of had the Discord going, if there was anything that I was like, this could be more obvious, or maybe we should be saying this, I kind of could update the induction in real time, so everyone that did it after that had that information a bit more
Mm-hmm.
clearly and like a document for next year. So that was kind of a really helpful part of it, was like those questions maybe that we hadn't really thought, and we picked up a lot of questions that weren't our area as well.
Yeah.
So a lot around IT and visas, which we just wouldn't include in our induction, but now know when we do it again this year to have that information to hand, but maybe also to kind of point to that as well through our
Mm.
inductions to make sure students are aware.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a really interesting point though about actually you've just created this massive bed of data that you've got 3,000 people who are asking questions, posting comments, sending each other messages. You can see in real time what people are thinking, worried about, and then yeah, you can share that with other teams as well. So IT and the visa team could see that kind of stuff, I guess. But then also for next year, you guys can use that to improve your comms. Which I guess then leads me on to the next question. That's actually what a seamless link. So I was going to ask you, yeah, kind of what the key takeaways were, what you've learned, what whether there were any challenges, and just what maybe things that other universities who might be considering um, this sort of thing, what they should be thinking about. Sorry, that's like 4 questions, but
I'll try and remember. Yeah, I was going to say on you were saying sort of around the big data and the live following. It was also really helpful when so there's like an IT outage midway through, and all the students were like, "I can't do my induction. I can't not induction, like that IT registration." And
yeah,
I went on the IT and I was like, "This is down." So then you can kind of reassure them in real time. Wait a couple of hours, have another go. Like there's so much stuff around that, like huge data set, being able to, like, say, change stuff in real time, have a kind of a huge document for our inductions next year of all that stuff, and that we can feed back to other areas and kind of FAQs we can make. In terms of, I guess, like, there were challenges. It wasn't perfect. There's things that I'm really excited to kind of amend slightly this year. Like say, like, yeah, huge data set. You've got to monitor it. So that was, I think, the really big challenge. And I think that would be the one thing that if other areas and other universities are thinking about doing it, that would be the one that I'd be like, go in with your eyes open about how much time this
yeah,
is going to take up. So I was trying to monitor it, basically, like try and read most of the messages. And that meant I was working kind of checking it in the evening, checking it at weekends, just to make sure nothing had
mm,
gone awry, nothing kind of bad had happened. But it does mean, yeah, you're doing a lot of out of hours management in terms of kind of my day to day.
yeah,
That was basically my job for 3 weeks. And so when we do it this year, I'm just clearing the period where it's happening, and I'm not planning to do
yeah,
anything else. And kind of, you kind of have to be aware that it's gonna be such a time suck, and like I wouldn't do it for longer because it's just not sustainable.
hmm,
But I think there's things that we can do and that I'm planning on doing. So like pulling in other areas, getting a bit more out of our support. We've been doing FAQs, so we got a lot of questions asked again and again. So now we've got that big data set we can pull together, and FAQs that will help. I think as well, one kind of around once people know each other, that sort of general chit chat, could that be moved elsewhere? So there was a point where there was like a lot, and whether we could have maybe gently encouraged them to have a WhatsApp group together or
mm,
have their own server. I think we could maybe gently manage that a bit more. I think being aware that if you are a space to ask questions, you will get a lot of questions, and students potentially, one of the things I found was, and we kind of all know this, they don't understand, at least initially, there's so many different bits of the uni, and that
yeah.
all those bits weren't on the server. So there's
But
like,
also like should it matter to them? Do you know what I mean? I guess from their perspective, it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, they just want an answer, don't they, to their questions.
Yeah, exactly. So like for us, I guess we maybe hadn't fully anticipated that. So definitely this year, getting some more takeovers on the channels from other areas so they can ask those specialist questions. Like we could answer some of them, but if there was a follow-up question about a visa, I wouldn't have been able to answer that and I wouldn't have felt comfortable answering that. And definitely I'm also going to kind of reach out to other areas to understand, right, what is the registration process? When will they find this out? When will they get this email? So that when we get those questions, we know what we're answering
Mhm.
rather than kind of scrambling in real time, kind of trying to find it out, like having that set up a bit more beforehand and whether actually we can share that information a bit more as well. There's little things around spam, so making sure you kind of set up for that, have rules around that. That
Did you get
inevitably
much?
happens.
Because I know I remember like back in the old days of the Facebook groups, it always used to be like people selling freshers wristbands.
Yeah.
And like, it'd be like, even when I went to uni, I remember this happening. Oh, it's 50 quid and it's the official wristband. And it's like, no, it's not the official wristband, is it? Was there anything like that? Or did you manage to kind of avoid it?
No, we did have a bit of that. We took a
Mm,
pretty
classic.
what's the word? Harsh line?
Yeah,
Like
fair.
promoting out. And so, yeah, we did have a bit. I think one of the things was around group chats, and students didn't realise this isn't an official group chat. We have our WhatsApp communities, which are kind of more broadcast.
Mm.
But I think clarifying that next year will be kind of useful, and then just carrying on with the same approach to sort of spam. I'm looking at fine tuning the registration process to maybe also kind of tighten that up a little bit. To definitely make sure we don't have anyone outside of that. They were kind of like the main learning points. We did room swaps and I don't think that works. So I think that's something that I'm not going to replicate this year. I think what I thought would be people would find each other and arrange those room swaps, but actually because the process is a little bit complicated, so you have to have someone same gender, same level of study, people just like didn't quite get that. So we're kind of looking at other ways we can do that, and whether my colleagues looking at like can we use AI to help support it. So I think that's one area where I thought, oh yeah, this is going to solve this problem, and it just didn't quite work. It wasn't quite the right channel for that, but there were so many other benefits in other areas, like that was kind of fine.
So yeah, you talked a lot about how students were, posting thousands of messages on the server. Were there any moments where that helped you identify students that might need additional help or support that maybe otherwise wouldn't have got that?
We do have a brilliant system and a lot of excellent support in place that my colleagues organise from kind of through the accommodation office. We have ResLife do things where they like check in with students before they move in and stuff. But we did have, for example, a student who was in Gaza. We weren't aware. And that just literally was me reading a chat about where everyone was, and they were like, "Oh, I'm here," and they
Right.
said, "Oh, I'm actually in Gaza and hoping to get my visa." And obviously, the situation there is incredibly difficult, and so I used that to contact my colleagues in ResLife and just say, "Look, I've noticed this on the Discord. Obviously, the student is leaving a war zone, so can we kind of, do what ResLife do so well?" And they were like, absolutely, we'll, make sure we pop in when they arrive and just check on them and make sure when they pop in, kind of signpost medical support, like local GPs, make sure they've registered and things like that. Another one that again was just me reading conversations with students talking about that they didn't want to register with a GP because they were LGBT and they'd had really bad experiences previously. Because I knew, so there's a charity in Manchester called the LGBT Foundation, and they have a scheme called Pride in Practice, which is where surgeries and GPs and other medical support like undertake additional training.
Hmm.
So I was able to flag that and then be like, and these are GPs that are on our website that have done that and have this level of accreditation, and that hopefully kind of reassure them that the medical support is inclusive. And then also kind of was like, oh, okay, this is a great point they've raised. Let's go and add it to our website. So that was another kind of way that we could help support students that might not have registered with a GP. And, it's fine when they're well, but then if they get ill, their lack
Yeah.
of registration. I mean, we've all been there. You're like, why am I not registered with a GP? So that was a really good opportunity to kind of identify those students and keep an eye on them.
Yeah, it's just like a real impactful stuff, like real benefit to this that wouldn't have otherwise arisen if we stuck to the old ways of working. So that's really cool. If I'm sure there are some people listening to this thinking, oh, maybe we should start our own Discord server. You know, you've talked a lot about what's involved, and it sounds like it's a lot. What would your advice be to any other university or team within a university or any other public sector body or anywhere really who's thinking about setting up a Discord server to do this kind of thing?
I think it's worked fantastically for us. I think we went in, I had a really clear sense of what we wanted to get from it, which I think is really helpful. I think having a clear understanding, like, what do we want to get from this? When is this running? I wouldn't run one any earlier because I don't think it would um the things we wanted to achieve, they wouldn't be achieved prior to kind of allocations. So I think having like a really clear understanding, what do you want from it, what do the channels need to be, what is the purpose of each channel. So I was quite clear with each one, like, I want, you know, even the like squad finder, I know for some students having someone to do sport with is really important, helps them settle. So like having a really clear sense of like, that's what I want to build from this channel, this community. I think having a clear understanding of just the moderation and what approach you're going to take. So I tried to make sure at least one of us looked at the messages most of the time, or like looked at most messages if there might have been a bit of a delay, but you kind of can't leave it, and being clear that you can't just let it run. You do need to keep an eye on it. You do need to moderate it, and having like really clear moderation and stuff like that. Having a clear time frame was really helpful for us. So when is this for? I would say 3,000 is probably the upper limit of how big I'd go as well. So like if you want to do bigger, then you're probably going to want to be employing like, or having kind of like an admin team, because they do get very busy. But I know Conversion have slightly smaller ones and they're a bit kind of less. I think because of the 3 window and excitement and moving, it was very, very busy. But I think kind of
Yeah.
smaller one, it's much easier to manage. So being kind of aware of that. But I think they're hugely useful. I think students want a place to ask questions. So, you know, this is a brilliant channel to do that and to provide that support and help with that transition. Um, and yeah, bringing together teams as well, like being aware that it's not going to just be questions about your area. There may be, particularly with students coming in, they're not going to understand the divisions in the university, and like, this person doesn't know about careers. Like making sure you're aware of that and having those links and reaching out to people ahead of time, which is something we're going to do even more of next year, because I think it'll be really, really valuable to be able to kind of support students in that way. But yeah, like the results, you know, it's a great channel. We did a survey and the feedback was fantastic. So it's definitely something we want to take forward. I would say definitely look into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting and new way of doing things that, yeah, until I kind of came across it, I wouldn't have thought of. So definitely something to try out.
100%. I mean, I can see so many benefits to this. So I'm super excited to see what you do with it. I was going to say next year, but it's only a few months away now, really, isn't it? September.
It's so close.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe come back on the podcast later this year and talk to us about how
Yeah,
the next
absolutely.
round has gone. But yeah, Emma, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a really interesting conversation. Thank you.